This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, wrestling fans. It's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. It's often been said that the victors write the history, which its fans have often seen have led to many wrestlers being left out of the conversation when it comes to their standings as legends or Hall of Famers. As we examined in our first video on this subject, there are many unsung heroes from the 1980s. Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments looks at 5 overlooked and underrated 80s single stars, Part 2. Before we get started though, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Here are the criteria. What makes an 80s wrestler overlooked or underrated? First, we're looking at wrestlers who enjoyed their greatest success in the 1980s. They may have started in the 1970s and even worked into the 1990s, but their heyday was the awesome 80s. Second, a wrestler is overlooked if they've somehow slipped through the cracks when it comes to appreciating their contributions to the industry. On a similar note, underrated could be someone who has received some accolades, but who deserves more. Paul Orndorff. Should Paul, Mr. Wonderful Orndorff, have defeated Hulk Hogan for the WWF Championship during their epic 1986 feud? Some fans question whether the WWF missed an opportunity to take Orndorff and Hogan to even greater heights with a shocking title win. In hindsight, it's unlikely to have happened since Vince McMahon was hoping that Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 3 would break the bank. However, if the urban legend of McMahon having Orndorff on speed dial, in the event Andre couldn't work WrestleMania 3 due to Andre's ever-delicate physical condition, it's possible that Orndorff could have served as a transitional champion, defeating Hogan at a high-profile event such as a Saturday night's main event for dropping the belt back at WrestleMania 3. Regardless of how things might have played out, Paul Orndorff remains one of the most underappreciated figures of the 1980s. After pro football didn't work out, Orndorff worked tirelessly to become a professional wrestler, eventually breaking out in Mid-South Wrestling. An argument over losing to the Junkyard Dog led to Orndorff leaving Mid-South. Orndorff had no trouble finding work in Georgia Championship Wrestling, but Booker Ole Anderson fired him when he missed a date due to an injury. It all worked out though as Vince McMahon brought Mr. Wonderful to the WWF, turning him into one of the company's top heels. It wasn't hard to do. Wrestler B. Brian Blair praised Orndorff's ability to enrage fans. In my opinion, Paul's the greatest wrestling heel that there ever was. He could get real heat, not cheap heat, but the kind of heat where people wanted to kill him. Working alongside the WWF's indisputable #1 heel Roddy Piper only took Orndorff further, and it only made sense for him to be Piper's tag team partner at the inaugural WrestleMania. Incredibly, Orndorff proved he could work well as a babyface after Piper berated him for losing the match. No thanks to blundered interference by Cowboy Bob Orton. However, Orndorff, who was always depicted as one step away from blowing his top, eventually succumbed to ego, turning on Hulk Hogan and starting one of Hogan's biggest feuds. The Hogan-Orndorff feud was so successful that both men would work a match and hop onto a plane in order to work at another arena the same night. As noted in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, The Heels, the program saw the two work 3 sold-out shows on the same night. Orndorff's manager, Bobby the Brain Heenan, once remarked, "There are very few guys like Orndorff that are really athletes that really can do what I like to do in the ring, which is to have a great match." Unfortunately, an arm injury ended Orndorff's career in 1987, and while he returned to wrestling in 1990, he wasn't the same. Neck injuries eventually led to him retiring for good in 1995. Mr. Wonderful's WWF career led to a 2005 Hall of Fame induction, but it's doubtful how many fans or wrestlers today appreciate just how successful he was. Orndorff's role in the first WrestleMania is often eclipsed by Mr. T, Roddy Piper, and Hulk Hogan's work. Likewise, Orndorff's off-the-charts feud against the Hulkster in 1986 needs to be better appreciated. Dutch Mantell. Dutch Mantell has done almost everything in professional wrestling, beginning with a solid run as a wrestler and continuing into later work as a booker, color commentator, and manager. The man billed from Oil Trough, Texas, maintained a strong presence in Southern promotions, particularly Continental Wrestling Association, where he held numerous titles and battled with Jerry the King Lawler when they weren't teaming together. With his trusty bullwhip, Mantell was more than a big fish in a small pond as he wrestled worldwide, including campaigns in Japan and a record-setting run in Puerto Rico's World Wrestling Council, where he and tag team partner Frankie Lane reportedly sold out shows 9 weeks in a row. Dirty Dutch, as he was nicknamed, wasn't the original, as another Dutch Mantell wrestled during the early 20th century. Dutch also guided the careers of several young wrestlers, including Stone Cold Steve Austin. Mantell bestowed Austin with his name and his stunning nickname. In his memoir, The Stone Cold Truth, Austin recalls traveling with Mantell to shows and learning from him. As far as Austin is concerned, great promo guy, great worker, and a great mind. Sitting there listening to Dutch, you can't help but learn a few things. A gifted storyteller, Mantell told reporter Mike Mooneyham what makes pro wrestling different from other jobs. Pro wrestling is not a normal lifestyle. We're not athletes, but we're athletic. We're not stuntmen, but we do all the stunts. We're not comedians, but we're funny. We're not actors, but our emotions range from rage to revenge to malicious acts to comedy. We are all things to all people, and a wrestler's range knows no boundaries. Dutch Mantell is a wrestler who did well for himself, and while he never won any major world championships, he was always in demand as someone who could add flavor to any promotion. Looking at Mantell's multifaceted career, it's easier to note where he didn't work than where he did, a reminder of how much he was in demand. Playboy Buddy Rose. Although pro wrestling has always had a certain look expected of its performers, a look that has changed over time, men like Buddy Rose are a reminder that there are exceptions to every rule, especially when they bring something special to the table. In Rose's case, his physique might have resembled that of a frequent visitor to the local all-you-can-eat buffet, but his work in the ring quickly dispelled any doubts about his wrestling ability. Rose is one of wrestling's best performers, a talent who could take incredible bumps, could work with any style of opponent, and who was extremely agile. His ability to enrage fans was incredible, whether it was cutting promos or tormenting babyfaces in the ring. Rose's ability to work equally well in singles and tag matches only added to his value. While Buddy Rose spent much of his career in the Pacific Northwest Territory, he also was successful in the WWF and the AWA. Rose's feud with WWF champion Bob Backlund was successful and impressed the champion. Buddy and I had some great matches together. He was a very agile worker with a lot of great moves, and given how athletic he was, we could do just about anything in the ring together, which really allowed us to put together entertaining matches for the fans. He was also willing to do anything for the match and the storyline, including submitting at the end of most of our matches. Many heels were reluctant to do that because it is such a decisive victory that it steals a lot of a heel's heat. But Buddy didn't care about that. He understood the storyline and knew that it would really get the people amped up to see him forced into that position. And the people responded. Buddy Rose could always be counted on to help out, whether wrestling the opening bout of the first WrestleMania under a mask as the executioner, or teaming up with Doug Summers in the AWA to help get over the Midnight Rockers. Marty Jannetty would comment about his time working against Rose and Summers. Both of these guys were perfect to take us to the next step, the next level. Buddy Rose, he's like a genius. Doug Summers, he was solid. I think Buddy was really the best part of the team. Not putting Doug down. Doug was just a solid worker. He was there to do whatever. He knew the basic stuff, but Buddy had great ideas. Buddy Rose created many unforgettable moments during his campaigns in wrestling, including his team with Ed Wiskowski in the Pacific Northwest, his many feuds there against babyfaces such as Rowdy Roddy Piper, his aforementioned programs in the WWF and AWA, and of course, his ability to laugh at himself, such as demanding that announcers bill him as weighing 217 pounds, as opposed to 317. Even fans unfamiliar with Buddy's work are likely familiar with the WWF's Buddy Rose blow-away diet vignettes that played off the many ridiculous diet fads of the 1980s. Butch Reed. Butch Reed was a wrestler who successfully switched from amateur and professional football to professional wrestling, an accomplishment in and of itself. Reed worked a highly acclaimed match against NWA World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair early on in his career, a sign of big things ahead. Reed was a type of legitimate athlete and tough guy that promoter Bill Watts liked, which led to a strong push in Watts' Mid-South wrestling. Reed excelled as both a babyface and a heel, with fans admiring his toughness when he worked as a hero and begrudgingly respecting him when he worked as a heel. Reed was a prominent name in Mid-South, winning the promotion's top titles and feuding with its biggest stars, including the Junkyard Dog and Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Reed's jump to the WWF in 1986 has led some fans to believe that the move hurt Reed's standing as a potential main eventer. Vince McMahon had Reed dye his hair blonde and adopt the gimmick of the natural. While the blonde hair was ridiculous, that was the point. And to be fair, African-American wrestler Sweet Daddy Siki had pulled the blonde hair gimmick off well. Second, the WWF reportedly had major plans for Reed. Reed's manager Slick claimed during an appearance on the podcast Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw that they brought Butch in to mimic Hogan and dye his hair blonde, and he was supposed to become Intercontinental Champion. That's what they brought him up there for. He started missing shows, then they lost confidence in him, and that was the end of that. This isn't the first time the story surfaced, as the Honky Tonk Man has claimed he was given a shot with the title after Butch was nowhere to be found on the day he was supposedly booked to win the belt. The highlight of Reed's career was working in the main event at the first Survivor Series, where he worked on Andre the Giant's team against Hulk Hogan. Unfortunately, things didn't get any better, and it's likely that Reed's previous absence made it unlikely the WWF would give him any top spots, particularly with a championship. Despite a mixed run in the WWF, Reed's career recovered when he worked in WCW as one half of a women's tag team, Doom. Reed and Ron Simmons' mask weren't fooling anyone, but they proved a highly rated team in WCW. Doom was successful, both with women managing them and later referee-turned-manager Teddy Long. Reed and Simmons won the WCW World Tag Team Championship and had memorable programs with the Road Warriors, the Steiner Brothers, and the Four Horsemen. Hercules. Ray Fernandez Jr.'s incredible 1980s career saw him work alongside some of wrestling's all-time greats, whether it was his program with Harley Race in Central States Wrestling, or his respective teams with The Assassin, aka Jody Hamilton, and Mr. Wrestling 2, aka Johnny Walker. Interestingly, Hercules donned masks in these tag teams, working as Assassin number 2 and Mr. Wrestling 2. The original Mr. Wrestling 2 took the name Mr. Wrestling 1. Hercules worked in various territories, including Jim Crockett Promotions, Mid-South Wrestling, and World Class Championship Wrestling before he hit the national stage in the WWF. Initially managed by Classy Freddie Blassie, who referred to Hercules as the strong man from the Latin lands, his contract went to Slick upon Blassie's retirement. However, bigger things were in store for Hercules, and the WWF had Slick sell his contract to Bobby the Brain Heenan. Hercules began competing as the Mighty Hercules, complete with a chain that he carried with him to matches. Like most heels in the WWF at this time, Hercules worked his way up the ranks until he landed title matches against WWF champion Hulk Hogan. The two met in many matches, but their televised match on Saturday night's Main Event 8 was Hercules' most high-profile bout. Hercules' impressive physique and his ability to incorporate brawling and power moves made him an effective heel. After adopting the full Nelson as his finisher, Hercules feuded with Billy Jack Haynes. The two met at WrestleMania 3, where their match ended in a double countout, but Hercules wiped Haynes out with his trusty chain. The big man's career peaked when he began feuding with the Ultimate Warrior, after the two engaged in a tug-of-war with Hercules' chain that saw the chain snap. From there, Hercules feuded with Ted DiBiase after Heenan sold Herc's contract to the $1 Million Man, with DiBiase expecting Hercules, or Herc the Jerk as Bobby Heenan began calling his former client, to be his slave. Hercules' biggest problem was one common to many WWF superstars. He was brought into the promotion to be used as a challenger and work one or two programs before falling down the card and putting newcomers over. The Mighty One's wrestling skills didn't plummet, but the WWF refused to use him as anything more than a mid-card act. His later Power and Glory tag team with Paul Roma showed promise, but it quickly became evident that the WWF saw them as no more than glorified enhancement talent. Hercules showed that he had plenty to offer in the 1990s when he went to Japan, forming the Jurassic Powers with Scott Norton. The team defeated the Hellraisers, Hawk Warrior, aka Road Warrior Hawk, and Power Warrior, aka Kensuke Sasaki, for the IWGP Tag Team Championship. What 80s single stars do you think don't get their due? Share your thoughts in the comment section, and let us know if there's any videos you'd like Wrestling's Greatest Moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on X and Instagram, and spread the good news about Wrestling's Greatest Moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.